always recommend that if someone wants to go really kind of like out of the city limits, that they actually spend a week here and in that town that they're looking at.
Welcome to the Closing Table Podcast, real accounts from real estate professionals brought to you by WindowStill. I'm your host, Kat Schooler, and today I'm sitting down with real estate agent Suzanne Wilson. Suzanne started her real estate career in California and then in 2020 relocated to Texas. So naturally, Suzanne specializes in California to Texas relocations, and she's licensed in both states. Today, she shares with us her lifelong dream of working in real estate, how she created an online real estate apparel brand, her tips for her relocation clients, and what she thinks they should do before they even decide to move. And then stick around to the end for her tip for agents if they are considering being licensed in multiple states. Without further ado, let's chat with Suzanne. Suzanne, thank you so much for joining me today. Can you start our listeners off with how you got started in real estate?
Sure. So I've actually been licensed now quite a while. I got licensed end of 2008 in California, and my driver for that was growing up. I had an aunt and uncle that were in real estate, and they owned a real estate franchise in North Carolina. And I would always play realtor with I always called it playing realtor every time we would go to North Carolina in the summer and stay with them. I would go to the office with my aunt and I would like hang out in her office. I would go with her when she was like checking in on her sellers. I even went to like a couple like real estate conventions with her when I was in middle school. So in middle school, I just had this idea that I was always going to sell real estate. Didn't happen right away. After college, I moved to New York City. I worked in the financial field. And then I was actually going to sell real estate in New York. But I ended up coming back to California suddenly. And then that was like right around the time, that's when the banks were, we had the Great Recession. All the banks were collapsing and things like that. And I no longer had a job in New York. So then I thought, well, like I'm here back home in California, no time like the present to go get my real estate license. I saw real estate in California. And it just so happens I was in this mall and there was a real estate office and they had a sign in the window that said like $99 real estate training, real estate school. And so it was night classes like 2 days a week. And I just thought, you know what? Okay, I'm going to do it. And so I signed up and yeah, and then got my license.
Wow, that's so interesting how things just kind of fall into place, and the whole the housing market crisis and all that stuff in '08, it didn't scare you away?
No, it's funny because so it was at the end of 2008 and everyone was telling me, I remember when I was freshly licensed, newly licensed, I walked into the office and of course I had all this enthusiasm and I said, since I was all excited. And this one realtor was like, don't quit your day job. Like, what are you doing? Like, and everyone was saying, and another agent said, like, the house is basically on fire and everyone's running out and you're running into a burning building. But it didn't, I don't know. Maybe it's because I was young. I don't know, but I wasn't scared. She's like, okay, well, here I am.
Right, and you've been doing it ever since.
Mm-hmm.
And so I saw in 2020 you relocated to Texas. So
Yep.
now you're licensed in both states, correct?
I had a little bit of a detour to Texas. So in 2019, like I wanted to move somewhere else. I wanted to just try something like leave California. I was just in the mood for a change. So I actually went to Seattle and I was briefly licensed in Washington and I was selling real estate in Washington in 2019 in the beginning of 2020. And then when the pandemic hit, it just so happens I was back home in California when everything was on lockdown. And basically, I never went back to Seattle but 3 months later, when Seattle was still shelter in place and Southern California was shelter in place, at that point, I was like, well, I don't know if I want to go back to Seattle. And I was going to have to restart my business because I had such a new business in Seattle. By not being in Seattle for those 3 months, pretty much I had lost all my headway that I had started to make. So I was kind of like, do I go back to Seattle? Do I stay in Do I just um, like kind of reset up my business in California since I'm here? And it was my sister and brother-in-law were living in San Antonio, and my brother was in law school at the time in San Antonio. So my sister moved to San Antonio, and my sister had just gotten her real estate license in Texas. And she was brand new. So the next day, my sister called me and she said, Robbie, who's my brother-in-law, Robbie has your whole life plan, your new life plan figured out. We've decided that we just bought a home. We have an extra bedroom. You're going to come to Texas. You're going to rent a room from us, while you get your license out here, and you're going to sell real estate with Cynthia. And we have your experience, and Cynthia is like been living in Texas for a while. So like, it's kind of like the best of both worlds. And you could help get her, like, teach her things, and she could teach you things about like Texas real estate, like the differences and how things are done out here. And I'm single and I don't have kids, and I had like nothing really holding me back, and I just thought, like, you know what, why not? And so it was kind of a last minute decision, and I just upped and left and moved to Texas. So, and I'm still actively licensed in California, so I sell in both states now. And then Washington, I never renewed my license, and so I don't sell real estate in Washington anymore.
Very nice. And so you specialize in California to Texas relocations, correct?
Correct. That
So, what made you kind of decide to keep that California license and kind of take this path?
Honestly, initially it was because I wasn't sure if I was, since I had never really spent much time in Texas, I just thought, what if I get out there and I don't like it? And what if I want to come back to California? Like, I wanted to have the door open. It's funny, one of the president of the former company I used to work at, he said, "You're my options girl. You like to have your options. Like, you love having options." And it's so true. Like, I like having, I'm the type of person that I just always like to have like an option. And being born and raised in Southern California and having the most tenure there, I just felt like at the time originally, I didn't want to let it go. Like, I always wanted to just kind of keep that in my back pocket. And then when I got my Texas license, which actually wasn't until 2021, it just so happens that I kind of fell into the California to Texas relocation, because a lot of the agents that I had worked with in the past for several years, um, like I would say 2020 to 2022, there was a huge boom of California to Texas movement. And, Austin's popular. And I also sell in Austin too, but Austin's popular, Dallas is popular. But what I realized is a lot of my agent connections didn't have any connections in San Antonio. Like, they didn't really know anyone. And so it just so happened that I was the person that they knew when people would come to them and say, like, they have sellers, and they'd say, "Yeah, I'm relocating to San Antonio. Do you have an agent there?" And they would say, "Yeah, actually I do. It's one of my former colleagues." Um, or they would know people at their brokerage that would be posting on their brokerage site and say, like, "Hey, does it by any chance, does anyone have a realtor in San Antonio?" And then they would do the introduction and say, "Yeah, my friend and former colleague, like, she's out there." And so my first year selling in Texas, I did 32 transactions my first year in Texas, and 2 years in Texas. First year was 17. I did 17 deals my first year in Texas, and out of the 17, um, 12 were California to Texas relocations, and another two of
Wow.
those would have been military relocation from different states.
That's
So
really
that
neat.
just kind of
So,
became my specialty.
yeah, you fell into it, but which is so great because you're so, you're knowledgeable. You're the living California to Texas relocation. Um,
Well, and it
you
helps.
so you've
Oh, sorry. I
Oh,
was gonna
go
say,
ahead.
too that I know California contracts. California and Texas is very different with their process. And so it's really like in Texas, you have to pay for the option to inspect a home to get your earnest money back. And we don't have that in California. And so it was really
Mm.
beneficial to be able to sit down with people and explain that, like, hey, we're very different than California. Here's some things to look at. And I could use the different language. Like in California, where we have this, the equivalent to that is this in Texas. And so that was really helpful.
Awesome. So, as someone who's been licensed in multiple states, if other agents are considering it, what would you recommend? Would you recommend that they do? Would you recommend they maybe be in a more specific situation like you were in?
I think you really have to figure out what is the best strategy for your business. In other words, I don't think you should just randomly go get licensed in another state. I think if you're in a state where, like, let's say, like for a California agent, for instance, a Nevada license might be great because Las Vegas has such close proximity to California, and Las Vegas is lower price points, and there's a huge like Texas, there's a huge relocation migration movement to Las Vegas. So, like, let's say I had never moved to Texas, I would have actually gotten my license in Nevada, and probably would have moved to Las Vegas because it's like Texas, it's a tax-free state. There's no state income tax. The cost of living is cheap like Texas, but then you're so close to Southern California that you don't even have to get on a flight. You can just hop in your car and drive over. Arizona, Phoenix area, that's a little bit further, but I know there's a lot of Southern Californians that have friends in Arizona, family in Arizona. Like if you're in an area where you're in a lot, like you're visiting a lot, you're there a lot, you have a lot of connections, and you can easily get there, like I think within driving distance, then I think it's very smart to maybe tap into that market because like Southern California is a luxury, it's a higher price point market. Um, in your bread and butter markets and the cheaper price points, it's a lot easier to slam through the transactions. There's a lot more transactions that are able to happen because it's a cheaper price point, because it's pretty much like on par with renting in those cities. So it's a lot easier to just like do your day-to-day transactions, but then still be in California for your current book of business and the higher price points. And then I think it would also make sense if someone knew they were moving. Like one of the things that helped me with Texas, so like Washington, I just went up there and got my license, and I went up there just immediately right when I had my license. I didn't have any time to get to know the area or really acclimate. With Texas, I was living here a year before I got licensed. So it gave me time to meet people and everything. And so I would say that if you're going to be moving, like if you're like, you know what, in a year from now, I want to live in Nashville or wherever it is that you want to move to, I would start the process like a year in advance and then start visiting there at least and getting acclimated, getting to know the neighborhoods, getting to know the areas. Or like it would make sense if you live in a border state that's so close together, like North Carolina, South Carolina, Myrtle Beach is just on the other side of the border of North Carolina. My friend is a realtor in Rhode Island. She just got licensed in Connecticut because she's right across the border from Connecticut. So I think like depending on your business plan is like real. I wouldn't just randomly. I think if it benefits you, if you're going to be there a lot, or you're on a border state, it makes sense. But if not, probably not. Like, don't do it just because it seems like the cool thing to do.
And you also have like a real estate apparel brand. What
Yeah,
made you want to go get into that?
yeah. So that I started. I feel like e-commerce is, I would say, wave of the future, but I feel like it's already here. Um, it's e-commerce and any kind of digital business, like selling digital downloads, affiliate marketing, things like that is so hot. It's a really good way to have a side income in addition to real estate. And so in 2020, when I moved to Texas, I was living off of the selling real estate in California part time. And I needed some other source of income besides just selling real estate. And I had a friend that had started an e-com site, and I thought, you know what, like real estate apparel, anything that's like notebooks, coffee mugs, and then apparel. It's become really popular for people to have like real estate like type themed apparel and products. And so I thought, okay, like let me look into it. And the trick is that it's basically drop shipping. So what I really did was start a drop shipping business. So when people go onto my site and they place an order, I don't have the merchandise with me. It's another company that fulfills that merchandise and mails it out to them. But I do all the designs myself and I upload it into the website and set the price.
That's so fun. And the apparels and the sayings, they're really cute. And I think that's really fun. I do think people like stuff that's like in their business, and real estate is a big niche, right? There are tons of agents, and you don't really see like tons of like agent themed products out there. So I think that was a really smart thing for you to do.
Thanks. Yeah, my sister, I right now what I'm doing is I'm actually gifting uh some of my merchandise to different agents across the country, and then I'm going to have them post on their stories and show them, because right now a lot of my downfall is a lot of the stuff I've been posting is just the images, and I want more like
Mm.
models, more live, like at a coffee shop, like someone having like their tote bag, or like my sister has a picture in one of the shirts with her out and about walking her dog. So I've already like have the orders out, but basically I have a handful of agents across the country that are going to get merchandise that they picked out, and that they could get photos of them in that I could then post.
Oh, that's really cool too. In mentioning social media, you do a lot of your own social media and things like that. What have you found to be kind of like the things that have worked best for you? Like any tips that you share with other agents in regards to social media?
Yeah, so one of the things that I realized last year was um, you have to really niche down on who your target audience is. So, like for instance, my Instagram, the Suzanne Wilson, I that was my personal account, and then it kind of worked into like a business account, but I was all over the place. It wasn't really niche down content. And so I realized like last year, like end of last year, like a lot of my growth was just stagnant. It really wasn't growing. And so I wanted to figure out like who my target audience was and who I really wanted to cater to. And for me, I decided that since I had a stand store and I was selling digital downloads, and apparel, real estate apparel, that I wanted my target audience on that account to be helping realtors scale their business on social media. And so starting at the first of the year, like pretty much 80% of my posts is tips and tricks for realtors and how to build their business on social. And then I created a separate business account, and that one's just for property tours and real estate related stuff. And then I have my Instagram account for my apparel company. But I would say figure out who your target market is. And like what I'm starting to do now for my real estate page is I've decided like my target market is obviously California to Texas relocations. But two, I want to get into the luxury market in San Antonio. And I sell a lot of new builds. So I'm going to do basically like luxury new builds and really start funneling that in, and doing like the California. I still get a lot of California to Texas business, so like funneling in the stories, like taking walking people through the stories of others that moved from California to Texas, and then also for property tours being at like luxury new construction. So but I just feel like you need to basically figure out what your niche is, and then that's what you need to just really be focusing on.
That's great. And, speaking of like client stories and sharing their stories, do you have any like, kind of favorite client stories or relocation stories you'd like to share?
So relocation, I had a so a lot of my relocation clients actually don't come here until either the final walkthrough. Some of them don't even come out here until after the closing. And I had this one particular client last year. They were from California, referral from one of my agent friends. They came out to look at different neighborhoods, but then when they went under contract, they weren't here through the whole process. I was FaceTiming. It was a new construction. I was videoing every week at the new construction site, so they could see the sheetrock, everything going in. Gave them like bit by bit, and I did like progression photos, and
Oh,
I would send those to them. And for me, it was just a really touching moment um, when they pulled up in their Tesla and they had California plates on, and it just kind of like reminded me of when I was pulling my car into the driveway at my sister's house when I first moved here. There's something about it that was just emotional for me. Like they were so happy and so excited. I remember being like, I really hope they like the house. But they came in and they were so happy, so excited, and like looking around, and we're just, I don't know, it was just a nice moment. It was special.
it sounds like it. So, you mentioned with working with relocation clients, like a lot of the times they're not in the state, right? You're doing things over FaceTime or video. So, like, can we go a little more in depth on what it's like, working with you, on what it's like kind of going through a major state relocation?
So it always starts off with a buyer consult call, which is usually over Zoom. And then we put together their timeline, certain areas that they're thinking about. Usually they'll do a discovery trip. Well, and I always recommend that too. So if they don't want to, I really push that because I think, FaceTime videos is fine for the property. I'm not concerned as much about the property as I am by the neighborhood, especially if you're coming from California. Like if you're coming from a couple people came from San Diego, but most of them are from LA and Orange County where I lived and grew up, and it's very different from San Antonio. And especially like I have clients right now, they're from the Bay Area and they're looking in Texas Hill Country, and but I've had people that have come out here, they think like, oh, I have this vision and I want to live in this big house that's out in the country, so to speak. And to me, that kind of scares me because you haven't been here. And maybe you do want that, and you want the chickens, and you want the wildlife, and you want like the space and everything. But it's the reality check is you're going to might be 30 minutes to the nearest grocery store. You might be an hour to a Target. Like you might be like 45 minutes to a Starbucks. And are you going to be okay with that? Like I always recommend that if someone wants to go really kind of like out of the city limits, that they actually spend a week here and in that town that they're looking at doing an Airbnb and doing the day-to-day drives. And I've saved people from, I'm not saying don't live in these towns. I'm just saying like I feel like people have to have be a dose of reality of what it is that like their dream and what's reality. Because that might sound great, but if you literally are used to being in an urban area every single day, you might not like that. Like there's a handful of people that have done that and they're like, "Oh, you know what? We don't want to live. Thank you for telling us to do that." We just Some of them not even a week. They'll be there for like a couple nights and they'll say like, "Oh yeah, we can't live here. This is too far out. Like we need to live somewhere else." So for me, a discovery trip is really important. And to drive the different neighborhoods. New Braunfels, which is halfway between San Antonio and Austin, is super hot. A lot of people love New Braunfels. And it's great because you're halfway between Austin and San Antonio, but kind of the same thing. Like, do you want to be hanging out in New Braunfels? Because what is the realistic chance you're going to be driving to San Antonio or Austin? And maybe it is. Maybe you will drive there a lot, but like I also have a lot of Californians that have come out here that are working from home or hybrid work from home. Um, and telling them to like do the commute. Like if you have to be in the office in Austin once a week or twice a month, do that commute to Austin in traffic times and see if that's something that you're going to be okay with. I also have people that come out here. I've actually sold 2 homes in San Antonio that to people that wanted Austin, that were very set on we're moving to Austin. They did their exploratory trip, came out here, decided Austin was not for them, really had to like push them to go see San Antonio. Like, just trust me on this. Like, come see San Antonio. If anything, you go to the Riverwalk and like, you have like a vacation. And they came to both of them came to San Antonio and they ended up buying in San Antonio. And they were saying, like, oh my gosh, like, thank you for telling us to come here. Like, this is great. We love San Antonio. So they do the discovery trip. They nail down the community or like a few communities that they really like. And then from there, I could run with it from there. And I do FaceTime tours live with them. I could zoom in on things, zoom out on things. Like I could just keep going, read tour for them if they want to go see another room. Um, but it's very hands on. And then usually there's like 3 or 4 homes that they narrow down that they really like out of those FaceTimes. And then I will go over like the comparables, like what things are selling for in those particular tracks. And then once they're under contract, I'm usually the one that will be there for the inspection. Usually they don't come out even for the home inspection. So then I'll FaceTime them at the tail end of the inspection. And then the inspector will go over what he found during the inspection, ask them if they have any questions. It's pretty seamless. And then like with a new build, sell a lot of new builds, I do the blue tape walkthrough usually, which is where you take the blue tape and you put it on different pieces around the house, whether there's imperfections. And I will FaceTime them and I'll point to like show them like this is what we blue taped. This is what needs to get fixed. On the punch, this is the punch list. This is what needs to be fixed. We're going to come back on this date and make sure that all these items on the punch list were taken care of. And then if they're here for the closing, in Texas, unlike California, you have a closing table. And that's always a fun experience from people from California, since we don't have that out there. And then I make it special for them. And I usually, depending on their preferences, I'll have a bottle of champagne or flowers or like a home cake or something. It's kind of like make it like a celebration. And then we'll go to the house and have a little celebration there. But that's pretty much kind of like the process.
Oh, that's great. And I love the idea of a discovery trip. Now, if when you're talking to people, if when they're like, "Ooh, discovery trip sounds good, like we're capable of taking the time to do that." And if they say like, "Can we look at houses while we're there?" What do you recommend? Do you say like,
I
"No,
do that.
not yet?"
No, I
Yeah.
do that. I
Okay.
actually am kind of, I know some realtors, now this is going to obviously change with the new rules that are coming in August. Um, but I mean, well, yes and no. I mean, in Texas, you have most brokerages, mainstream brokerages already require in Texas to have a buyer rep agreement. So for me, like when I was in California, they called them buyer broker agreements and I never got them signed. But in Texas, like pretty much every mainstream broker in town requires you to have a buyer representation agreement. So I already have the agreement done, but I know some people like with pre-approvals or whatever, they get very funny with like, if I don't have everything in line, I'm not going to take you out. Or like until you're ready to actually pull the trigger and write an offer, I'm not going to take you out looking at homes. I'm not that strict because I feel like, especially someone coming from out of town, they do need to see what their money can get them. And then that also helps because when they leave and I'm doing a FaceTime, they've seen like the buyers, the story I was telling you about, they bought in a community in New Braunfels called Veramendi. And then they went out to this community called Meyer Ranch, which is like very far, it's very remote feeling. That was like one of those things where they were saying like, no, we can't live this far out. But they love Veramendi and they love the look of it. They love like they love the vibe of the community. And so it actually does help to like take them to certain neighborhoods. Like once they have it kind of towards the end of their discovery trip, when they kind of have it narrowed down, like this couple was saying, like, we know absolutely we want to be in Veramendi. Like this is where we want to be. Then it was totally easy to just focus on that neighborhood. And then by them seeing houses in other neighborhoods, not just Meyer Ranch, but they were like, oh, like, no, we don't really like, we don't like where this is located. So yeah, and it's resale, same thing. Like I'll take them into open houses. And I will be, and if it's not an open house, I will be honest with the agent and I will tell them, this is a preview trip, do you, because you don't want to inconvenience sell, like you want to let them know, like, hey, is it
Mm-hmm.
okay? I have clients, they're thinking of purchasing in this area. Would it be okay if I could show them the property? So I'm very transparent about that.
I think that's good. And then, like, who knows? Like, maybe they could fall in love, right? You
Exactly.
never
And
know
that's what
if you
I
don't
tell them.
look.
You never know. And sometimes that's also what motivates them. Sometimes they'll be on a discovery trip and they'll say, well, we're probably going to come out here, next month. And then they fall in love with, this has also happened, but then they've fallen in love with a neighborhood and a house and they did see the house. Like they love the neighborhood and they love that house and they hurry up and they write the offer.
That's so cool. So, I know you mentioned like a lot of your relocation clients have come from, referrals in California. And if people are moving to Texas, they from California, they should totally, check you out. But say they're moving from, I don't know, North Carolina to Alabama. How do you recommend like people go around like finding a good agent like in a different state?
So what's helpful for me, because I've also placed her, I've gotten referrals from agents from other states besides California as well. And then I've placed
Mhm.
referrals. Honestly, it's been a lot through networking, just through different Facebook groups or people within your brokerage. So prior to me being at Real, I was at EXP, and three of the referrals that I've had in Texas is from an agent at EXP in Colorado. And she was referred to me by a agent in California. But I've since like I've really connected with her, and then I've sent out business from people that I've found on different real estate groups. I have people at Real that have found me from different Real groups that I'm a part of. So I would say, and also what helps is going to broker events. So your brokerages events. Honestly, that's something I wish I would have done more of at my previous brokerages when I was in California. I never really went to brokerage events. And I feel like that is such a mistake because that is gold for getting business because you're face to face with people and you really build rapport with people. The agent in California that referred me to the agent in Colorado Springs, I met him at a realtor boot camp that was put on by EXP agents. And a lot of those agents, like my Houston agent that um, I'm now actually joined the board in Houston, but I'm only work certain areas of Houston because it's a lot further of a drive. Like if it's like the northern suburbs of Houston, I won't touch that. He works in the northern suburbs of Houston and he's my go-to person. And I met him at an event. So you really get to bond with people when you go to these events. So I would say go to real estate events and really heavily network. Like don't go there. Like, and I think about all the time I used to go to Tom Ferry events and I never really networked with agents. I would just go to the conference and sit in the room and listen to what was being presented. And then I would pretty much leave. And that was such a missed opportunity. I think more important than the actual conference is really just hitting it hard with the networking and getting in as many rooms as possible and talking to as many people as possible and making those connections. That will really help you. And then virtually, like just making connections on social, I've become friends with agents in many different markets across the country. I just became friends with an agent in Oklahoma. Like maybe, she's in a military market. You just never know like where your next referral deal is going to come from. And it just really helps building as many relationships as possible. And that's like liking their stuff, commenting on their stuff, like sending them a message, introducing yourself to them, and just really start building connections with all these different agents.
Awesome. So something I meant to ask when we were talking about your Texas market, and I love that you're very open with your relocation like clients and doing the discovery and like like if it's not for you, like I'm not gonna force you to live here. But when you're talking to them about your Texas market, like what do you tell them? Like what is your favorite things about your area?
One of the things that I love about since I've moved here is that, and obviously Texas is very big, but in the area that I'm in, it's a very chill lifestyle. And I tell people all the time, like my friends in New York, my friends in California, um, because I'm such a city person that everyone was shocked when I moved to Texas. Like, you're a city person, like you moved to San Antonio. Like, they were just blown away. Um, and honestly, when I first moved here, my plan was I was going to live with my sister and brother-in-law until I got licensed, and then I was probably going to move up to Austin. Like, that's kind of what I was thinking. But a year later, I love living in San Antonio, so I stayed. But I think what I really gravitated towards was the fact that it's just a very easygoing lifestyle. The cost of living here is low. San Antonio is the seventh largest city in the country, but you would never know it. It still has a kind of like a small town feel. Everyone's friendly. It's easy to get around. Um, and for a major city in the country, it is below the national average of all major cities in the US. So to have the access to an airport and a bigger international airport in Austin, um, have access to shopping, be an hour south of Austin where there's more shopping, um, for the value for what you get for your money is really great. It's really hard to beat. And the weather, summers are hot, obviously, but I always tell like Californians, especially that are worried about the summers really aren't that bad. Like, you get used to it. You really do get acclimated to the heat. And it's a blip on the radar. They're gone before you know it. And 9 months out of the year, the weather here is perfect. It's like Southern California weather. It's not, it's actually warmer here in the winter than it is back home in California. Like, our average temperatures, I mean, they can get cold here in the winter. We'll have like a couple colds, like a couple weeks out of the year will be cold, but the average daily temperature here in the winter is in the 70s. And versus back in
Oh
like
wow.
Orange County, LA, by the coast, it's like the average daily temp is in the 60s. So, and you will have a lot of 80-degree days in the winter. Like, 2 Christmases that I've been here, it was like 88 degrees, 86 degrees on Christmas. So like it's nice. Like, it's just nice. It's warm. We have a lot of sunny days here. So you just have a lot of sun, and it's just a very easy, chill lifestyle.
Very cool. It's funny for me, like we're in Michigan, and so like 88 degrees on Christmas is just like mind blowing to me. But I'm also like picky. I'm like, it can snow from Thanksgiving to Christmas, and then it doesn't need to snow any after the New Year. And in Michigan, it starts snowing in February and then snows till like May. So, you know, you take what you can get. Well, Suzanne, do you have any goals for the rest of the year? We're about halfway through the year. Do you have any goals for the rest of the year you're trying to meet?
Yeah, so I am looking forward to, I had surgery. I had a lumpectomy a couple weeks, 3 weeks ago, and that kind of took me out for probably like the last couple months of just mental mind shift or whatever, like mind space. That's what I was trying to say. It took a lot of my mind space, and then of course the surgery and the recovery. And right now I'm just really looking forward to being, the last week or so has been full steam ahead. So looking forward to just really like catching up so I could hit my goals by the end of the year. My goal was to sell 50 homes this year. That's not going to happen. But I my goal now is to at least hit 25. So I've got a lot of catching up to do. So I really have to pound the pavement. And I have 2 listings right now, and I have a handful of buyers that are coming in, relocation clients that are coming in town. So really my goal for my real estate side of things is just to really hunker down and focus and catch up for the time that I feel like I lost the last couple months. So I can end the year really strong. And then also from my ecom site, I kind of like let that go the last 6 months. And I want to, in the next month or so, bring out a lot of new designs and really like ramp that up. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Just ramp up both ends of the ramp up both businesses that I have going on essentially. And also last year I stopped going to California for business. I pretty much was just doing by referral only. Actually, since I moved to Texas, it was pretty much by referral only. And then this year I decided that I want to go back to doing the two-state juggle, which requires me to be there every month. So like next week I'm flying to California. So starting this month, I'm essentially going to be going to California once a month and really like stepping up my business in California. So then that way, and also what helps is, when you're back, this kind of goes back to that original question about working 2 states. Like you can't commit to working in 2 states if you're not going to be in that other market. So like committing to basically, being there once a month, checking in with my referral partners which also helps with referral business, but checking in with like my escrow team, title team, agents that are showing agents for me, things like that. So yeah, if my goal this year is also like to have bring presence back in California as well.
Awesome. Well, Suzanne, I'm so glad you're doing well post surgery, and I know you're gonna kill those goals for the rest of this year. If people want to check out your apparel brand, if people want to work with you, how can they find these things?
My apparel company is liveloverealestate.co. And I also have an Instagram page that's at Live Love Real Estate. My uh if it's an agent looking for help on things, that would be my main page at the Suzanne Wilson. If they're a buyer or seller, it would be at Suzanne Wilson Realtor. And my website is thesuzannewilson.com. And they could reach out to me through messaging on social or on my website, or they could text me, and my cell is 424-392-0082.
Awesome. And we'll link all those things in our show notes so that people can easily find it. Suzanne, thank you so much for joining me today. It was great talking to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Closing Table podcast, brought to you by WindowStill. I'm Kat Schooler. Please make sure you are following our podcast on Apple or Spotify, and if you're part of our YouTube audience, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you're enjoying this podcast, consider leaving us a review or a comment. It helps us find more amazing listeners like you. Thank you so much, and we will see you next time.